We are back again with one of our favorite guests, Dr. Tomas Bogardus, and we're going to talk about the nature of the sexes. You have a new book out. Do you happen to have it on you so we can hold it up and
I do. I do have a copy.
do all that
Yep.
self-promotion? It's not even self-promotion because I'm promoting it for you.
All right.
Awesome. Yeah, it looks really nice. Very nice. I like the cover.
Thanks. That's
And
Saint Joan of Arc on the cover.
is that really? Okay. Very
Yeah.
cool and very appropriate. So the nature of the sexes, why biology matters. This is obviously sort of the culmination of many years now, I guess, of research, because you were, I feel like, pretty early on wading into the whole debate. And we've had 2 or 3 conversations on this topic before. They exist still on the internet on this podcast, so people can check those out. But I felt like, hey, let's have another one. I have not had my head in this space for a while, so it'll be good and interesting for me to revisit it. But take us back in time for people who are not familiar with you and your work, because I mean, this obviously isn't an area where you started your philosophical career, right? You've got publications and lots of, in philosophy of mind and metaphysics and stuff like that. So what brought you into the whole debate around sex and gender? Just give us a little background there, and then, we can start getting into what's in the book. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think the gateways for me into philosophy were philosophy of religion and philosophy of mind. And I wrote my dissertation in the philosophy of mind. And then I spent the first years of my career thinking about religious epistemology and the rationality of religious belief. Then around, I think I got tenure in 2017 or something, 2016, and just totally coincidentally, then I started thinking, maybe it's time to switch gears here a little bit. And I think around that time, I remember that Jordan Peterson was getting in trouble for some pronoun stuff in Canada. And I also remember some papers were coming out in philosophy about these issues. And one of them happened to come out in like the same journal that I had just published a paper. So just by chance, I had like seen this paper and read it. And then that got me thinking. I guess I felt in my current academic position, I felt like I had tenure and I was pretty professionally secure. And then also I felt like I was at a point where the pressure to publish was not so very great, not as great as it was like pre-tenure. And so like I actually could spend a couple years retooling and like not really publishing. And if there was like a little gap of a few years in which I didn't publish anything, that wouldn't be the end of my career. So that was nice. I don't think that like I wouldn't have felt that way at every institution for sure. So I had those sorts of professional advantages that I was like naturally curious about these issues, but also I felt like I actually could feasibly look into this. And so I guess I started thinking about it in 2016 or 2017. And I think the first step that a lot of professors take if they're going to retool is they start like reading these papers in their classes. And then, that forces you to make lecture notes or make a handout. So that's how things started for me. And then I published like a popular level piece about sex and gender stuff, I think in 2019 with Quillette. I think it was 2019.
I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah. And I had some papers that I was trying to get published. Oh, I remember like I did present one of these papers, I want to say 2018 I don't know if I should say where, but it was somewhere in the Netherlands.
You're in a safe space.
Okay, yeah. It was in the Netherlands, which at least historically has a very high regard for freedom of speech. So I guess I did have a paper in a kind of incipient form way back then. Then I did experience what I would describe as a kind of some degree of gatekeeping with professional philosophy journals, because unfortunately, like if you're going to publish in a certain area of philosophy and then you send in a paper to a journal and say like, hey, here's something I want to publish, it totally makes sense. But what they're going to do, what the editor is going to do is like think of people who work in that area to evaluate your paper. And unfortunately, if like an area in philosophy is pretty homogenous with respect to the diversity of ideas, that's a nice way of saying it, then if your proposal sort of is swimming against the current or going against the grain, then you're going to have a hard time finding two referees and an editor who are willing to publish the paper. So
Right.
yeah, I did experience quite powerful headwinds back in the day. Yeah, but then I managed.
Yet you were persistent. Yet you prevailed ultimately. So.
Yeah, fortunately, I do have like a degree of stubbornness, and yeah, I did not give up. But I will say, like, yeah, okay. So here's, I don't know. This is not something I've shared I don't think I've shared this publicly in very many places, but there were some health consequences. I did experience heart palpitations for a year and a half. So like irregular heartbeats. Yeah, it doesn't sound that bad, but it was like several times a minute, every minute, and it could be 24 hours a day.
Yeah, just from the whole stress of
Well,
the
I
situation.
didn't know. I mean, there was also like a giant wildfire in the area, which like coincided with the beginning of these heart palpitations. And then, yeah, I was just trying to figure out like what's causing these. And I visited some doctors and ran a lot of tests, and they were all like, "Man, your heart's fine. We don't know what the cause is." And they would always ask me like, "Are you under any stress?"
A lot of stress. Yeah, yeah.
And I would always say, "No, I feel fine." Because
well,
I'm not in
beneath
touch
the
with.
surface, then, yeah,
I'm not in touch with my feelings, so I
yeah,
couldn't recognize what was going on. And then, like, I honestly, yeah, those were my honest answers. Like, no, I'm totally fine. Everything's fine. But
yeah.
then the reason I think it was related to these headwinds and this gatekeeping was I remember when I finally got a paper accepted at a journal, like literally as I was reading the acceptance email, like the heart palpitations went away
It just ceased.
and never came back.
You know, that's so funny. I'll talk
Yeah.
that, and like, look, have had like all sorts of weird physical things related to projects as well, where like once the project is done, it goes away. But I don't even want to say a friend, kind of associate, had a symptom one time where they were writing a book, and throughout the entire process, I guess between until it was published, I think I can say his entire left foot was numb. Right?
Oh, wow.
Just like, but then like the book came out and then it was gone. It was just
Yeah.
like, it was just like whatever, the stress can get at you in really weird sorts of ways. So yeah, sorry to deal with that. It's also not surprising. The environment isn't, to put it nicely, the most positive and supportive when you wade into these sorts of the nature of these types of debates. So it's unfortunate that it's like that. But people who take a certain position, namely the one that you take against a certain cultural current, are not always received with sympathetic ears. And and you know, everyone who knows anything knows what we're talking about right here. But go ahead and elaborate. Yeah, share your lived experience, Thomas.
Right. I was just gonna say, like, so for sure, like, this sort of work has made me some enemies and ideological enemies, definitely. I don't think that was the source of the heart palpitations, though. And even just like the getting rejections wasn't. That's not new to any philosopher. Like I was on the job market for like 4 years. Just
another
like
Tuesday, right? Yeah.
Yeah, just constantly getting rejected. And there, like, my livelihood was on the line and my ability to support my family was on the line. And yeah, that was not a pleasant experience. But even then, I didn't get the heart palpitations. I think what did it was just feeling like, the sort of gatekeeping experience was literally feeling frustrated. Like, of course, I also felt like angry, but also just feeling like I should be able to succeed in this. And I'm being stymied or thwarted. And it's just like, it's unjust. And
that makes sense.
Yeah, it's like unfair. Because like, I know what sort of, like, okay, so a lot of philosophy is published every year, and it's not all good. Let's say that. there's a lot of like really bad philosophy published every year,
but it goes through peer review.
Yeah, and so what these like referees and journals were telling me was like, your paper is like not even good enough to be published, even though like a lot of not good philosophy is published every year. Your paper is not even good enough to be published. And like I just knew, like, even if it's wrong, like it's not that bad.
It's not, yeah, and you know that. Why? Because you are a professional philosopher. You've had lots of publications, and like just like people who don't really do this I don't have as many public as you, but I've got a decent number now. And I mean, it's just really, really silly sometimes. Like sometimes you can have, you can send a paper to one journal, and it might come back with the just the most scathing reviews. You might change nothing, send it to a journal of equal repute, and it gets accepted without any revisions.
Yeah, that's
like
right.
Right. So I mean, yeah.
And I guess I had also noticed, like even before wading into the sex and gender stuff, I had noticed that when I wrote a paper on epistemology, like my papers almost never got rejected. Like it was always revise and resubmit. Like one time I just got like a flat out, I think it was like a conditional acceptance. That's like the best that's ever happened. But in epistemology, it was much easier to publish. But then I also noticed, like when I tried to defend dualism in the philosophy of mind, like that's not a very popular view. And I would get a lot more pushback.
Yeah, isn't that interesting?
Yeah. And so, I mean, one possible explanation that is probably suggesting itself to the listeners is, well, maybe your philosophy of mind is just not very good. And your epistemology is really good. Okay, so that's one possible explanation. But another possible explanation is I'm pretty equally good at all the philosophy that I do. Some of the philosophy is like going against the grain and kicking against the goads and contrary to the current intellectual climate. And it wouldn't be super surprising if that kind of paper is harder to publish.
Yes. Okay. I think that's a much more plausible explanation than just you're good at this but you suck at that. I don't think that's right.
Whatever I experienced in philosophy of mind, it's like nothing compared to the sex and gender stuff. Trying to publish this, like my sort of views on sex and gender is I don't know what's the hardest mode in a video game. It's like playing on I don't know what's the hardest mode.
Super God mode, something like that.
Yeah, that's what it is. It's trying to play on that super hard mode. Whereas publishing in epistemology, that was a little more on easy mode.
Yeah, there's something there to it, right? And that's a shame. No, let's talk about that a little bit. We'll get to the sex stuff because I think this is interesting to people. It's like, man, it's like it sucks because it creates a kind of perversity, right? Where it's like if publish or perish, you just got to get tenure. Like then, of course, like once you learn the tricks of the trade, you're just gonna play it safe. A lot of people will, rather than like doing the thing that really interests you, or where you think you might be able to make a genuine advance or something like that. And like I do know tons of people, right, in good position universities, and I know that they wanted to write stuff on the stuff that you wrote stuff about. And they just weren't willing to touch it with a 10-foot pole for all the, not just rejection, but because they felt that they would like seriously be threatened at their institutions.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've seen that with my own friends who are actually publishing in this area. Like a lot of my friends and ideological fellow travelers are experiencing quite a high degree of quite a large amount of blowback and professional consequences. So that's real. I mean, fortunately, there's been a bit of a vibe shift in the last year, and the tide
I was going to ask you about that. What's the vibe right now? Yeah.
Well, I think certainly in the popular culture, things have changed quite a bit. And I mean, if you just take like J.K. Rowling as an example, like things were not going very well for her professionally, like 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
Like it seemed like, I don't know, it wouldn't have been crazy to predict like she's sabotaging her career. This is like career suicide. But I think in the last year or two, I think it's become clear that she's been vindicated, or
I think so.
To at least a large degree. Of course, she has a lot of haters still and a lot of people who are opposed to everything she says, but I think she's experienced quite a lot of vindication. So that's definitely happening at like the popular level. I think in academic philosophy, we've seen some degree of that. But still, I mean, you've got all the same people in the same positions, basically. And so,
yes, right.
And like not a lot of people change their minds. Those revolutions happen one funeral at a time, as they say.
Yes.
And so, it's pretty rare for philosophers to change their minds, but it seems like it's been a definite like vibe shift or attitude change.
Yeah.
So that's been nice.
Yeah. So I mean, it's to you too. I think. I mean, from my sort of outsider perspective, you give me the inside scoop. I mean, how do you feel? Do you feel vindicated, if you were. I mean, you got a book out of it, you've got publications, and I think that you are recognized as a very good and careful and important voice in this debate, in this conversation these days. So what's your overall feeling of where you are in your work on this now?
Yeah. Well, this what we were just talking about reminded me of a little bit of a story, and I guess here's some more breaking news, and I won't try to share too many like personal details or anything, but I think in around 2021, some other people and I working in this area were trying to publish an edited collection of essays. We were unable to ultimately. And I don't want to like name names or name publishers, but I'll just say like we got pretty far along the road with a certain publisher. And then like I don't totally know exactly what was happening behind the scenes, but after like 6 or 8 months, and we had basically been given the green light, the editor came back and said, like, here's something that we just had a meeting of all the editors, and here's something that was basically demanded of this book. It needs to have like at least one trans author. And the slogan that like was used to defend us was like nothing about us without us. And so this was a collection of essays sort of critical of like trans ideology and the trans activist movement. So that was, and I think surely the person knew this, like that was basically a poison pill. Like this project was not going to succeed. There were actually surprisingly one or two trans identifying philosophers who would actually be willing to contribute an essay to this collection that was kind of critical of the trans movement. Believe it or not, those people exist. We reached out to those people. Unfortunately, neither one was able to do it, and so the book just died. Okay, so that's how things were in 2021. Like those sorts of things happened. And then also, I mean, my friend Holly Lawford Smith had some well-publicized and negative experiences with Oxford University Press, and Alex Byrne at MIT had a similar kind of bad experience with OUP, Oxford University Press. So that's kind of how things were 4 years ago even. I guess I'll just share a little bit about my own experience. This book here, like, okay, so all of that was to say, like, I don't think this would have existed 4 years ago. Like, it could not have been brought into existence. In fact, I tried in like I guess it must have been 2022, maybe late 2022, early 2023. I had a contract with another publisher. And that made me feel pretty good because the contract said, like, we're going to publish this unless, like, basically there's like some word. It's a standard contract. They didn't write it just for me, but like in the standard contract, the wording said something like, as long as you don't deliver, as long as the author does not deliver something that is below the standards that this publisher could reasonably expect, then we will like work with you to revise it to make it publishable. So that like made me feel pretty good. I thought like, well, I'm not going to deliver something to you below that standard. So I think we're good. Like, I might have to make a lot of revisions to make everybody happy, but we can do that. Okay. But long story short, from my perspective, I think that they did not abide by the contract, and ultimately they decided not to publish the book. Even though I like showed them that wording, and I was like, is it your position that like what I delivered to you was like not even measuring up to those standards? And I guess, ultimately that had to be their position in order for them to not be in breach of contract. So that was like a long, arduous process. But then fortunately, I guess last year I found Routledge, and they were good enough to follow through. But even then, like even with another contract, like I was trying not to count my chickens before they hatch. And I really was not going to believe that the book existed until I was holding it in my hands. So that was really nice when I finally got a copy and I could actually like hold it in my hands. And now I know it exists.
It exists. It's real.
If I had heart palpitations, they would have gone away at that time.
Yeah, well, obviously, we're going to encourage people to go grab a copy. Grab 10. Christmas presents, birthday. Who wouldn't want that in their stocking?
Okay, yeah.
Okay, so where should we start with this? The nature of the sexes. Just give us your general thesis, if you will, and then I honestly I forget. I know we've covered so many angles of this debate before, so I'm sure we will cover or recover some of that territory. But yeah, where do you like to start people on this these days? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you just want to hear the thesis? Yeah, I can tell you the thesis, and then we can spend some time beating up on opposing views if you want.
Yeah, right. That's perfect.
So I remember when I put this on Phil Papers, I honestly don't like when I first put it on Phil Papers, there was like a one-line description of the book, and I honestly don't know where that came from because like I didn't put that one-line description in there, but the one-line description, like a couple philosophers emailed me because they thought it was hilarious. They thought like I did it on purpose, and then I read it and it was hilarious. So the one-line description was something like, "This book defends a novel theory of the sexes according to which they have something to do with gamete production." Yeah. So that was like funny to them because like obviously like that's not really novel. Like that's long been the view, but in our current cultural and academic context, like that is novel that somebody would say that. So I honestly don't know where that description came from, and it's gone now. And I replaced it with like the description I wrote for the publisher. But anyway, yeah, the thesis is the sexes, what it is to be male and what it is to be female, does have something to do with the production of gametes. Gametes are sex cells. So you have a bunch of like cells in your body. You have a whole lot of cells in your body. Some of them are related to reproduction, like sperm for males and eggs for females. The other cells in your body are not really related to reproduction. You've got skin cells and brain cells and liver cells, etc. Okay, so the sex cells are called gametes. Those reproductive cells are called gametes. And the thesis of the book is that the sexes are defined in terms of gamete production. Mm-hmm. So that's not enough to specify the view exactly because there actually are some other views in the literature that say as much. And there are many biologists who say as much. But I think, yeah, they'll often put it in such a way that like the view opens itself up to pretty obvious counterexamples. They'll say something like, male just means producing sperm, female just means producing eggs. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but then of course, like the question arises, like, well, you know, not all males produce sperm. Like juvenile human males don't yet produce sperm. Embryos are said to be male or female. They're not producing sperm or eggs.
Yep.
Yeah, and then, you know, postmenopausal females aren't producing eggs anymore. They're sort of out of eggs. And of course, if you have some sort of like injury or surgery or disease, you may not produce any gametes at all.
Yep.
So yeah, that's a natural kind of objection. So to sidestep that kind of objection or accommodate that obvious and true observation, I think that the view should be stated in terms of functions. So I think that to be a male is to be an organism with the function of producing sperm, and to be a female is to be an organism with the function of producing eggs. And I think that function talk is nice for a couple of reasons. One reason is biology is just like replete with function talk. It's just full of function talk. Like biologists love talking about function. So it is not at all foreign to the field. If you just open any biology textbook, you'll see a ton of language about structure and function. You'll read about the function of the heart and the function of the liver and the function of the reproductive system, etc. So yeah, I think that if you pay close attention to the organisms that biologists are calling male and the organisms that biologists are calling female, what you'll realize is, oh, they're really naming a certain kind of function. The biologists are naming a kind of function, and it's a function to produce sperm in the case of males or eggs in the case of females. And the reason this helps us sidestep that obvious objection that we talked about a second ago is it is totally possible for something to have a function but fail to fulfill it.
Of course, right? Yeah,
it's just that's the nature of functions. Things can malfunction. There's such a thing as dysfunction. I mean, that's basically our concept of health is a concept of proper function. Our concept of medicine requires that we have some concept of proper function. Like the purpose of medicine is to restore proper function. Disease is a case of malfunction or improper function. Okay, so it can totally happen that an organism has the function of producing sperm, but in the case of like embryos or juvenile males, is not yet fulfilling that function. Or in the case of injury or disease, where you've got like malfunction. The organism still has the function of producing sperm, but is being impeded in some way or frustrated in some way from fulfilling that function. Yeah, in just the same way that, like, if you take a hammer to a toaster, it's not going to be able to toast bread anymore, even if it has that's something it's supposed to do. Like toasters are supposed to toast bread. That's one of their functions. But you can pretty easily make a toaster malfunction. Okay, so that's the thesis of the book. Did you want to say something?
No, I want to hop in. Yeah, for sure. All right, so good. So like, I like that you're choosing to use the word function. That way you can play friendly with the biologists, but to just get a little bit more, I guess, metaphysical for a moment. Like, yeah, I mean, how committed is your project to like essentialism, right? It seems like it is, and it seems like most of your opponents would probably be as well, just in a different way, right? Of essences and aims, right? That there is a real whatness to something, and sort of included in that is a sort of teleological ordering, right?
Right. So by essentialism, you mean that, like, if we were to specify the essence of something, it would include like its purpose.
It's and I take it that in essence is whatever captures would be captured, I say, by the real definition of something. Right?
Oh, well, I definitely believe in that. Yeah, I definitely think that everything that exists has some real definition. There is something that makes it the thing that it is.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think that's true. I don't think that like every real definition is going to entail something about purpose or function or goals. There are some things that exist that don't really seem to have a purpose or function or goal. Like, I guess just the numbers come to mind. There's one example. Like, if you were to ask me what the real definition of 4 is, I don't think I would have to tell you like what it's for, or what the purpose of 4 is. Yeah. So, I don't think that so I do agree that like everything has an essence and everything has a real definition, but I don't think that every real definition is going to imply something about purpose or goal or some Aristotelian final cause. But in biology, I guess I don't know. Maybe there are some exceptions, but a whole lot of things in biology are going to be defined in terms of functions.
In terms of what they're aiming at,
yeah, like we don't have to use the word purpose or goal because that does sound suspiciously like there's a designer or something like that. Although, I mean, there was a paper that came out recently that's been pretty influential by my old friend Justin Garson and somebody who I don't know, Maximiliana Rifkin. And they presented a theory of the sexes on which the sexes are defined in terms of design.
Yes.
Yeah, but they were like very careful. Like, we don't mean design in any sense that implies theism. But still, like, they were willing to use the D word. So I'm not even using the D word.
I get it, because you're trying to be as modest as you can be without I guess diluting or distorting your position, right? And that's always a good question. Like, how much does my position ultimately require? And you clearly don't have to always answer that to advance your position as reasonable and responsible, right? So I think that's right. I think I agree with all of that. I would definitely want to say that everything has an essence. Do all essences include some sort of final cause? I don't have a firm commitment on that. I think as a theist, I probably actually want to say yes, but I wouldn't know what a lot of that is. You know what I mean? Right. So
I guess I'm open to it. I don't mean to like rule it out.
Yeah, like you're going to ultimately ground numbers and somehow in like the divine ideas, which are ultimately going to be wrapped up in some sort of finality, right? So there might be something there, but clearly that is not relevant for this. It's just you in biology and where you're focusing on. It's replete. It's replete with finality.
Yeah, I guess if the charge was laid at my feet that my theory of the sexes implies a kind of like Aristotelian essentialism, we might call it, where like everything has an essence, and what's more, every essence implies something about purpose or goals. Then I'll just deny that and say, like, you can accept my theory of the sexes and go either way on that further question as to whether everything has some purpose or goal. So that's what I would say in response to that charge.
But do you have to say at least some things do?
Yeah, at least something's
Yeah,
new, like
right.
the sexes.
Right. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and hearts and livers and a whole
Yeah.
lot of other things in
Spleens. Yeah.
spleens in biology. But if so, some people have made the charge like, well, your view just entails essentialism, period, and that's bad. And by essentialism, well, it's often unclear exactly what the smear is supposed to be, or like what the objection is supposed to be. But
Yeah.
it's something like, well, you believe that like things have definitions, I guess. You believe in essences, and
Yeah.
I guess in
I
some
do.
corners of philosophy, yeah, in some corners of philosophy, they take it as sort of given or established that there are no such things, like there just are no essences. And I guess I'm just kind of like betraying my upbringing or education, my philosophical training here, but um yeah, I don't understand how that could be true.
Yeah, no, I don't think it would destroy all thought at the end of the
Yeah,
day, right? I think it's a catastrophically
yeah,
unintelligible position, right?
yeah. So I just think like everything that exists, like there is some definition of like that kind of thing. Like there are there's a set of all and only the things that have that property, whatever the property is. There's going to be a set of all the and only the things that have that property. If it's
Yeah.
a real property, if it's a legit property, don't come at me with the like Russell paradox.
Yeah.
If it's a real property, there's going to be a set of all and only the things that have that property. And for any sort of property you choose, there's going to be like there's going to be something that makes it the case that that things have that property. Yeah, even
And
if
it strikes me that even a lot of the opponents of the position that you're defending are themselves implicitly committed to an essentialism. They're just thinking that you've got the definition wrong,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that if like you scratch the surface of somebody who's giving this kind of objection, you'll find an essentialist deep down. I mean, typically what they say, and I devote a little bit of space in the book to this, is they'll say, well, really, so much of biology, all the concepts, so many of the concepts we use in biology are really just cluster concepts, which is to say, um, the best we can do when thinking about like it's just like the central concept of life in biology. Like, what is it for something to be alive or living? The best we can do is come up with a list of features that we think are like relevant to being alive. And as long as something has enough of those features, then it's alive. But there's no feature on that list that's necessary for something to be alive. And yeah, that's it. So that's what it is for something to be a cluster concept. There's just this list of features. If you have enough of them, you're in the category. You have the feature. The concept applies to you, but no feature on that list is necessary for the concept to apply. Okay, and so they'll say something like that is true of the sexes. There's just this like list of features that are kind of relevant, like I don't know, having certain chromosomal arrangements or having certain hormone levels or having certain primary sex characteristics or secondary sex characteristics. That's what's on the list. And when we decide whether an organism is a male or female, we just kind of check the list. And if enough of the boxes are checked, then the thing's male. But there's no item on the list that's necessary. Okay, so that's typically what they mean when they say they're anti-essentialists, or when they say that there are no like essences in biology in any way. The sexes don't have essences. Okay, so what I say in the book is just in reply. Yeah, I'll give you like the thumbnail sketch version. One is that even on this proposal, it does sound like there is a definition of the sexes. It's just kind of a weird definition. And the definition is, in order to be male, something is male if and only if it has enough features on this list.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So, I mean, you're still giving me like a definition. It's kind of an unusual definition. It's like a motley assortment of features. You're not really
Yeah.
telling me why those features are relevant, but for some reason, if an organism has enough of those features, it's male. All right, so that's just what it is to be male, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think a more serious problem is this kind of proposal, this cluster concept proposal, is ultimately circular. And so I think a lot of people who hold this view will tell you they're inspired by Ludwig Wittgenstein and what he said about like games and family resemblance. And so what he said about those things is, so he famously challenged his listeners or readers to like come up with a definition of game. And he said, like, don't just assume there's something that all and only the games have in common. Actually look. And then he thought, like, if you actually looked at the games, you'd realize there's nothing that all and only the games have in common. There really is no definition of games. You might have thought, like, well, multiple players. No, solitaire. Well, certainly in a game, like, there must be a winner and a loser. Like, even if you're playing solitaire, you can win or lose the game. Well, what about like children when they play house or something? Like, that's a game they play, but there's no winner or loser. Okay, so you get kind of like counterexamples like this to any attempts to define what it is to be a game. And so we're told, all right, surely this then is a cluster concept. There's just a set of features, no one of which is necessary, but if you have enough of them, then you're a game. Then the thing's a game. Okay, and similarly, he said something similar. He said this is a case of like family resemblance. So there's really, he came up with this at a time when people had many children, which doesn't really happen anymore outside of Catholic communities. But I can relate to this now, living in a Catholic community. There are like big families, and you can kind of see like family resemblance among the families. Mm-hmm. But if you were to ask, like, well, is there some feature that all of them have? Like, do they all have the same nose? No, that's not really what it is to show family resemblance. Do they all have the same eyebrows? No, it's not really that. There's just rather like a kind of like cluster of features, and everybody in the family has like enough of them. They have like a lot of the features, but there's no one feature that they all have. Okay, so that was supposed to be another example of like a cluster concept. So if you were going to say that somebody is a member of the Jones family or the Smith family, allegedly what you do is like check off items in the list and then see if the concept applies, if the person has enough of the features. Okay, so here's the problem. So I had said that I think ultimately these proposals are circular, and that's because, like, if you were to say, like, what are you really telling me about family resemblance? Are you telling me like how it is that we figure out whether somebody's in the Smith family or the Jones family? We look at their features. Well, that cannot possibly be right. Just for two reasons. One is like that's not what it is to be a member of the Smith family. Like you could have somebody who resembles people in the Smith family, but who is not part of the Smith family. Mm-hmm. Like there are doppelgangers out there. Like there are people who kind of look like me who I'm not like part of their family as a result of that. So that's just, as a matter of fact, not actually sufficient to be a member of a family. But then secondly, like if I ask you, why did you come up with these features? Well, the explanation is, well, yeah, what I had proposed was you're a member of the Smith family if and only if you have enough of these features characteristic of the Smith family. So I must have already known like who the Smith family was when I came up with these features. Like I must have surveyed the Smith family and said like, okay, well, here are the features that like they tend to have in common. So I must have already known who the Smith family was. And obviously I didn't do that by like surveying their features or seeing who resembled whom.
Right. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So the circularity problem is it looks like the proposal is really something like somebody's a member of the Smith family if and only if they have enough of the features characteristic of the Smith family. Okay, so then like we've used Smith family in the definition of Smith family, and that's no good. Same thing with games. Yeah, if I said like something's a game if and only if it has enough of the features characteristic of games, like obviously I've gone in a circle. So similarly with the sexes, like if you were to tell me, well, here are the features that are relevant to something being male or something being female, check the chromosomes, check the hormones, check the genitals, etc.
Yeah.
Well, the reason you're telling me those features is because those are the ones that are relevant to sex, right? Those are the ones that are relevant to whether something's male or female. Yeah, in fact, I'm doing a little research for a paper I'm working on now, and I don't know, in certain corners of academia, it's become fashionable to, instead of talking about gender or sex, to talk about gender/sex, to use that term, gender/sex. So yeah, I think this is just muddying the waters and it's a confusion. But if you ask people what they mean by gender/sex, they mean, they say, oh, it's the features that, are both gendered and sexed. And they'll give you an example like testosterone. They say clearly that's like a sex feature because it's like part of your biology. Your testosterone levels are part of your biology, but the levels of testosterone that you exhibit can be influenced by your culture, by your society, like certain stresses or whatever can influence how much testosterone you're producing. So that's an example of gender/sex. Okay, the reason I mentioned this is the paper I was just reading, like if you ask, well, what is sex exactly? And I wouldn't have thought that like testosterone is part of the definition of sex. I would not have thought that. It's linked to the sexes, but it is not like part of the definition of the sexes.
Yeah.
You could have a species, and surely there are species where there are males and females, but no testosterone at all. Just think of like some super primitive creatures or some plants or something like that. Like I guess, yeah, I'd have to ask some botanists or ChatGPT or something, but I'd be super surprised if like every species uses the same sort of hormone systems. Anyway, this paper said, well, here's what it is for something to count as sex. It's okay. I'm going to try to remember this. I hope I don't butcher it, but it's something like, I probably have it open on my computer.
Yeah. Well, you find that real quick. The other thing with the cluster concept thing I wanted to mention is that, there's always an essentialist lurking, is that presumably those concepts or those features, there's a whatness about them. Right. So at some point,
I'm sorry, dude, you broke up a second on my end, and
I was just pointing out, trying to highlight the point you made about how there's always an essentialist lurking somewhere. Even if somebody tries to take this cluster concept, route all the way through, you're going to get back to some concepts, some features that have a whatness about them, right? In essence. So if that's being used to dodge essentialism, I don't think it's ultimately going to pan out, right? All to say, I just think that if the way somebody's trying to push back against your position is to attack you on the essentialist front, I think that's a mistake. I think that's too high of a cost to try to pay. Did that come through? Is this breaking up?
Okay, I'm sorry to tell you this, but I heard like 50% of that. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. I'm cool if you just say that everything I said was great and we can turn it back to you.
Okay. Yeah, that all sounded really great. The 50% of that I heard sounded really awesome. I don't want to make you repeat that for the audience, but now, now I'm hearing you. Yeah. Man, I'm on campus. I really should have like a good internet connection here.
Yeah, no.
So I don't know why it suddenly broke up. Sorry. Okay, well here's
you're coming through great though. So go back to your point. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay, well I found the thing that I was looking for here. So this is from Sari Van Anders, and this paper's from 2022. Okay, the name of the paper is Gender/Sex/Uality, like sexuality. Gender/Sex/Uality and biobehavioral research. Okay, so there's a section called What is Sex? And here we're told in the first paragraph of that section, sex can be understood as biological/evolved, biomaterial, and or bodily/physical aspects of organisms, individuals, or characteristics. Okay, and so I'm just going to stop right there. So what we've been told is sex can be understood as certain kinds of characteristics: biological, evolved, biomaterial, bodily/physical aspects. Okay, so it just sounds like basically any biological aspect of an organism. That's what we've been told so far. So obviously that's not a good definition, because I've got a whole lot of biological features that are not sex, right? That don't make me male, that are not related to being male or female. Okay, but the definition continues. So sex is basically any biological characteristic that can be classified as female, male, and or sex diverse. Okay, well that's kind of a disappointment, because now I've just like used sex terms in the definition of the sexes, right? So I'm told, oh, you want to know what sex is? It's any biological feature related to sex.
But no bad philosophy is ever published, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm kind of picking on somebody there, but yeah, that is a non-philosopher. That is somebody. To be honest, like I don't totally know how to classify this person, like gender studies or I don't know, but it's definitely not philosophy. And like, but that's like I don't want to pick just on that person. Like this, it is so common, especially among biologists. But also even in like among the ACLU and the CDC and the American Psychological Association, like when you ask them to like define what sex is or define what gender is, like the results are not good. The results are
You're right.
really
Yes.
bad.
Yeah.
So, if anything, that makes me a little more confident that philosophers will survive the oncoming AI apocalypse, job apocalypse, like longer than maybe other people. But so that was an example of like a circular definition. And I think something similar is happening with the cluster concepts, where they tell you, well, yeah, to be male is to have enough of the features characteristic of males. You're like, oh, cool, thanks so much. I think if anything, like the reason this is the last thing I'll say about cluster concepts. I think the reason this kind of proposal has been so attractive to philosophers is because it gets something right about like the psychology of concept application. So it is true that like when I'm observing some new organism and I'm wondering like whether to call it male or to call it female, or maybe it has no sex at all, then I do kind of like check sex-linked traits. Like that is how I like apply concepts. So similarly, like if I'm in a jewelry store and I'm trying to figure out whether this is gold or silver or platinum or something like that, like I do look at superficial appearances. I look at features that are like linked to gold, that are associated with gold. I check the color, I check the luster, I checked the price. It was really expensive. Okay, it's probably real gold. But none of this is actually like part of what it means to be gold. Like you can have gold that's not yellow. You can have gold that's not very lustrous, and you can have gold that's cheap. And so yeah, these are like traits that are at best correlated with being gold, but it's not really part of the definition of being gold. Okay, similarly with the list of traits we're often given when people tell us, well, sex is super duper complicated and there's no such thing as sex itself, we're often told. There's no one thing that is sex. Sex is just really, it's more complicated than you can possibly imagine. Okay, so that's the kind of view that I am pushing against, and I'm trying to say, actually, in I don't know how many pages, 70,000 pages or something, we could actually figure out what the sexes are, and state it pretty succinctly. And that's actually just like one chapter, just one section of one chapter where I say what the sexes are. And I think it's relatively simple. It's not complicated. And so I already said it. I'll just say it again. To be male is to be an organism with the function of producing sperm. To be female is to be an organism with the function of producing eggs. So yeah, that's the response to the cluster concept stuff.
Okay, good. Yeah, you said that there were opposing views, so other viewpoints. What's another one or two that's worth having a?
Yeah. Well, I guess one that is pretty popular, like on social media and in sort of activist circles at kind of the grassroots level, people who have just enough philosophy to be dangerous. They've learned just enough philosophy to be dangerous. Something they've probably learned is to call a variety of things social constructs. And they think like that's very insightful when you say something like that. When you say that like morality is a social construct, or like God is a social construct, or something like that. That sounds like kind of philosophical and deep. And there are actually people who will say that the sexes are social constructs. So definitely there are people who say gender is a social construct. I'm not talking about gender right now. I really do mean it when I say that there are people on the record, not just like activists, but also like professional academics, who say things that imply and entail that the sexes themselves are social constructs.
Yes, right.
Yeah, and so I think what they mean by that is, if you say that something's a social construct, what you mean is it exists, but just like in light of some conventions, or given some conventions, or according to some conventions. So I'll give you an example. Touchdowns exist in American football. There are touchdowns. They are very real, and people get paid a lot of money to score touchdowns. So yeah, touchdowns exist, but they exist because of us, because of like certain rules we adopted, conventions we adopted, a game we invented. Okay, and if we wanted to, we could change those rules. We could change those conventions, and we could change like how much a touchdown is worth, or what counts as a touchdown. Okay, so
or the state of Texas, right?
Yeah, the state of Texas, right? So that's another example. Texas exists; it's very real, but it exists because of us, because of certain boundaries that we abide by, conventions we've adopted. Okay, and like it hasn't always existed. Like that plot of land has existed for a very long time, but Texas itself has not existed for nearly so long. Okay, same thing with like touchdowns. Touchdowns have not always existed. We kind of brought them into existence by adopting certain conventions. Okay, so I think people mean to say something like that about the sexes. They mean to say something like reality itself, like biological reality itself, is just kind of like messy and complicated, and it can't really be pinned down. And then what biologists did is they came along and like imposed structure on biology that wasn't really there. Sort of like artificially drew lines. We like gerrymandered the sexes.
Right.
In the same way that like Texas's boundaries are kind of weird. Like it's not, it's sort of weird. We got like a river down south, but the rest of it is just like weird, random straight lines. Okay, kind of arbitrary. Okay, so the view is like we did something like that with biology. Biology itself is just kind of like a messy kind of like oil painting, and everything's kind of bleeding into everything else. And then we came along and like imposed structure on biology. But biology itself doesn't really have that structure. Okay, so yeah, the sexes exist, that's true, and biologists, study the sexes, that's true. But independent of our minds, before humans came along, there were no sexes. That's a category that like we created. Okay, so that's the view. Okay, so I think that is kind of a common view. I don't think it's a very good view. I don't think it's true. And an argument I give in the book is just asks. So I just say like, look, the sexes are really old. The sexes have existed at least as long as sharks have existed, because sharks have been reproducing sexually from the jump. As long as sharks have existed, they've been reproducing sexually with males and females. And sharks are really super old. They're like older than trees, it turns out. they're literally older than trees. So if you're really gonna bite the bullet and say the sexes do not predate humans, then you have to accept the implication that like there were no sexes before trees when sharks were reproducing. Okay, but then natural question is like, how on earth did they reproduce if not by means of males and females? Like, how did they make so many shark babies without males and females?
Jaws
okay,
Jr.
And then I guess and then I guess the reply is like, well, obviously, like those swirls of atoms, I guess, got together and like reproduced. But just like, okay, and then I think the reply on the part of the sex realist is, what you just described are males and females getting together. Like that just is sexual reproduction. That's what we named. Like that process you just described, the way the like swirl of atoms like conjoin so as to produce babies. Yeah, it's sexual reproduction. We named it. In just the same way that like we named trees and we named sharks. Sharks were around long before we like stuck a label on it. Okay, so similarly, these these more general types, male and female, were around for a super long time before we came along and stuck a label on them, called them male and female. Okay, so I think that's the reply. And I guess another reply, well, look, here's sort of the game that's played between like realists and social constructionists. Social constructionists love to point to examples like touchdowns in Texas and the color spectrum. And they'll say like, oh, look, the color spectrum, like you think there's such a thing as red and it's distinct from orange and that's distinct from yellow. But look at the spectrum, everything bleeds into everything else. Isn't it like arbitrary where we've put those borders or boundaries? The color spectrum itself has no such boundaries. Okay, so they love examples like that. Okay, but if you took that line of reasoning to its logical consequence, like it would imply like not just that like touchdowns don't really exist independent of human minds, and Texas does not exist independent of human minds, but also like mountains don't exist independent of human minds. I'm gonna like warm my way up to the more extreme implications. but some of them were willing to bite the bullet, and they'll say, yeah, even mountains, like, yeah,
Mhm.
it is arbitrary, like the limit we've set on mountains, like over a certain elevation counts as a mountain, below that elevation is not a mountain. That is kind of a weird arbitrary convention that we've adopted. So they might be willing to go along with that and say, yeah, even mountains did not exist before us. Okay, same thing with planets then, I guess, right? Like, we in living memory, NASA has like changed the scientific definition of what it is to be a planet. So Pluto got demoted. Okay, so then I think they're going to also say that, like, yeah, even planets are social constructs.
Yep.
And before humans existed, there were no planets. Okay, so now we just keep going and say, like, does the same thing go with sharks? So like before humans, there actually weren't even sharks or dinosaurs. And yeah, I think a consistent social constructionist will say even there, those things do not predate humans.
Right.
Okay, and then just keep going and just ask about like fundamental physics. Like, what about electrons? Do those things predate us or not? And I think like the same kind of reasoning that got you to the conclusion that touchdowns in Texas and mountains and planets don't exist, I think it's going to lead you to the conclusion that even electrons don't exist, and we made those too. Okay, so that's pretty wild. Yeah.
And not only that, but I think it would have to turn on it. Like, is the human mind that constructs things socially itself a social construct?
Yeah, that's right. So I guess that's something I hadn't thought about. Yeah, if everything's a social construction, then I guess like we are too, even the like constructors are like social constructs.
We constructed ourselves.
Yeah.
Socially, yeah.
Yeah, maybe they'd be willing to accept that because at least like they don't have to...
Clearly that's going to be self-undermining, right? As a sort of rational basis for something. Yeah, because how would we need to delimit at some point. We need to, and right, you can't do that if you're going to push the social construct theory like all the way through.
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah, if it's going to be like social construction is going to be a kind of like creation relation, and so you've got to have something existing in order to like create something, and so you can't have like humans creating themselves or constructing themselves. Yeah, that's gonna be impossible. That's like saying something created itself.
And and just to clarify too, for the real, and I'm sure you're happy to go with this, for the realist who's the essentialist, like we don't deny that certain things are conventional. Touchdowns, Texas. We just deny that everything is, right? And I think that's just the reasonable, common sense view. And some things are hard to tell, but this is sort of mereology too, arbitrariness. Like, we have beard. Like, I'm happy to say that Tomas Bogardus has a beard, but if you ask me exactly when someone goes from being just merely a little bit rugged to having a beard, I'm not going to be able to tell you where that line is. But at the same time, I think that it's pretty easy to identify when we are over it at the same time. So yeah, vagueness, arbitrariness, this is a big philosophical debate. I don't think everything is vague or arbitrary. I think there are issues that are murky and like, okay, is this thing something with an essence, or is it, Aristotle thought about this, or is it an artifact or something like that, right? An aggregate. There's ways of thinking about these things where you can allow for there to be conventions and artifacts and aggregates and say, okay, yeah, maybe this thing isn't a thing. It's, it's a collection of things or whatever. But I do think it is absurd and untenable to be an anti-realist and an anti-essentialist all the way through, right?
Yeah.
And I mean the general like place that is it von Inwagen, right? I think that for him mereology, like it's just biology where you have composite or something like that, right? Like biology is like this almost the safest area where like you don't have to worry so much about some of these issues. And I think it you can affirm real essences and composite objects far beyond biology. But yeah, just to say, like, the realist doesn't deny that there are social conventions or stuff like that, right?
Yeah. Well, hey buddy, this is gonna get really speculative. So I'm by no means married to these views, but after thinking about this with critics for a while, I am more inclined to like take a harder line and say, yeah, actually, even in the case of like touchdowns in Texas, the things that we are naming with touchdowns in Texas have, well, I guess with Texas, like we're naming a region of space, so it hasn't always existed, but definitely predates humans. The things that we're naming predates humans. Okay, and we just came along and invented a name for it. So if that's the case, then it's definitely not something that like we produced or we created. Really, all we did was name it. But we did the same thing with like sharks and trees and planets. So let me just give you an example. There's like when people were designing the game of football, there was like a kind of like logical space of like actions that they had to choose from. Like which one of these should we make the goal of the game? And so yeah, I guess like in baseball they chose one region of logical space and said like that's the goal.
Yeah.
And then in like cricket, I guess they had like another goal. But football, they were like, okay, here's what we're gonna do. We could like make a big rectangle and then say like if you cross a certain line holding the ball, that's a touchdown. Okay, but that activity, that possible activity, already existed, right? So all they did was come along and say like, we're gonna pick that activity that already existed. We're gonna name it a touchdown, and we're gonna like build a game around it. Where you try to get these things. Okay, but if that's right, then like touchdowns, what we now call touchdowns.
The touchdowns are fixed. And if you were to say a touchdown is shooting a basketball through a hoop, then that's not really a touchdown anymore, right? Yeah.
Well, that's just like a different part of like logical space of like all the behaviors that humans can engage in.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so we just picked one and we're like, let's name that one touchdown. But the thing that we named touchdown already existed and like predates humans. Like we didn't invent that. We just named it.
Yeah.
Okay. And of course we can like decide, and probably this has happened in the history of football. We can decide like, well, actually it'd be more fun if instead of like this region of logical space counting as a touchdown, we just like went a little bit to the right and like called this a touchdown. So we can definitely change what touchdown refers to. We probably have done that in the history of philosophy. Or sorry, not the history of philosophy, the history of football. We've probably done that. But nevertheless, like the things that we're naming in both those cases, like pre-exist humans. It's not something we invented. It's not something we created. So if you want to call it a social construction, like I think that's totally misleading. You should just call it a case in which we like named something for the purpose of like a game, or in the case of Texas, it's a case where we named a region of space for the purpose of politics or statecraft or whatever. Okay, so I guess that's what I want to say. These things have always existed.
I like that. I like that. Yeah.
Okay, sweet, good. Glad we're on the same page.
Yeah.
So yeah, then nothing is really a social construct, and it's just totally misleading to call it that, I think. So that's me taking a hard line. Because I did kind of feel like it's a little, I don't know. If you try to take the hybrid approach where some things are social constructions and other things aren't, like it's really puzzling to explain what the difference is.
I wonder. So like, think not to get too off topic, but like let's think about the special composition question, right? Like when does something count as a real composite object? I don't know, when there's whole priority over parts, I think seems like a plausible candidate. When there's, novel system level properties or powers, something like that, right? Could that be relevant to that area of social convention or something?
Well, yeah, I guess. I mean, we can definitely think about things that aren't really like fundamental. So I guess like it's been a while since I've read the composition literature, but I guess like one debate is whether like literally everything composes is anytime you have a collection of things, they compose something.
Universalism.
Yeah. So even if you think that's false, there's still like we can still name, and I'm kind of blanking on what they call these things. A fusion, is that what we call them? Where we just think like the tip of my nose plus the Eiffel Tower plus
and my not to brag, but Chrysler Pacifica.
Okay. So we can think those things together, and then we can ask a question like, do those actually compose something? And probably the answer is no, I guess. Certainly nothing like fundamental or like real, like
a basic being, right?
Yeah, but we can still like there's still definitely a set composed of those things, and we can name that set if we wanted to. Right. Like we can just name the set, and so that for ease of reference in the future, I can tell you like Remember Bob? Bob's the set of my nose, the Eiffel Tower, and your Chrysler. Okay, so we might have done something like that with Touchdown.
I see.
Maybe like that collection of behaviors is not really a natural kind. It's not fundamental. It's not real in some deep sense. It's not part of our most basic ontology.
Yes.
That doesn't really matter, I guess. The question is just like, is that like a set of behaviors that like exists in logical space? And the answer is yes. Okay, and then we can name it. And it might be like really, a messy assortment of kind of unrelated things, sure, but nevertheless, it exists. And
it's not something we totally invented.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, that sounds not just speculative and plausible, but bright and obvious.
Yeah. Right? So then I hope that I can just I hope that this view that I have expressed, that I admitted was kind of speculative, and I'm not married to it. I hope it just lets me like sidestep questions about composition. I'm not really claiming that like these things that we name are real or fundamental or actual composite objects. I'm just saying there's like a set of those things, and we can name those things. I guess sets are real. So yeah, I guess it is kind of real. Anyway, we didn't make it, is what I want to say. It's there, and we didn't make it.
Okay, cool.
I'm kind of skeptical that anything's a social construct.
Okay, cool.
Definitely the sexes aren't, because they've been happening for a long time. Let's just get us back to where we started here. The sexes have existed for a long time. Sexual reproduction has been happening for a long time. So whatever the sexes are, they're not something that we created. And to think that like what biologists do is just like approach, like it's just a mess of unrelated kind of phenomena and just impose structure kind of arbitrarily. To think that's what science is up to is, I think, a total misunderstanding of the sciences. I guess, like that can happen. That can happen, but then we think it's bad science. When good science happens, we're actually like carving nature at the joints, so to speak, and finding like real kinds. Anyway, I think the sexes are pretty good candidates for joints in nature.
Okay. Do you have time for one more quick one? One more other opposing position? Yeah.
Let's do one more quick one. Oh, you just want me to pick like another?
Yeah, whatever you think is. I know people are obviously going to get the book and make a great study of it, but let's do one more.
Well, I think if I recall correctly,
or just anything else from your book you think would be interesting for people to know at this point. Yeah.
Well, I was going to share about the ambiguity hypothesis, but I think we talked about that last time I was on your show. I don't want to like bore your listeners. Maybe we even talked about the indeterminacy thesis. I guess. Okay, wait. Let me think. Well, I guess I'll just tell you this. I mean, so after I developed the view and kind of explain my own view about what the sexes are, I try to motivate it by showing how it can deal with cases that kind of trouble other.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, show how it's a fruitful theory, right? Yeah.
Yeah. So one of the objections that I think about is, and this comes up in the literature, believe it or not. So some people also wonder about like what the difference is between sperm and eggs. So we can wonder what's the difference between male and female. And if I tell you, well, males have the function of producing sperm and females have the function of producing eggs, some people think, well, you have sort of just delayed the problem. You've like moved the bump in the rug, but we've still got a problem here because you got to tell me like the difference between sperm and eggs. And if you say something like sperm are like smaller and typically more motile or mobile, they move more than eggs do. Eggs are larger and kind of immotile, they don't move. If you say that's the difference between sperm and eggs, then you'll open yourself up to this kind of objection. People who are neck deep in this literature will tell you that there is a species of fruit fly in which the males make truly enormous sperm.
Wow.
Yeah, they make just a few sperm, and they're really quite large, especially like relative to the size of the fruit fly. I don't know exactly what the ratio is, but it's like shockingly. The ratio is shocking. How big these sperm are. Okay, and so they say, look, sperm don't really have to be small after all. Here are some fruit flies that make really big sperm, really large sperm. Okay, so just for your listeners, if they want to defend this kind of view on which the sexes are defined in terms of gametes, if they meet somebody who gives them a hard time about the difference between sperm and eggs, the thing to say is this, I think. Don't commit yourself to the view that sperm are small and eggs are large. Just don't say something like that. Because, I mean, to be honest, I'm not totally sure what the defining feature of sperm is and what the defining feature of eggs is. It may well not be size. It may be something else, and we can talk about that in a few minutes. But that's one thing to say. Just don't take a stand on what the essence of sperm is and what the essence of eggs is. Just be neutral on that question and accept that it's totally enough to just say sperm exists, eggs exist, and they're different. So something must make, and I don't have to answer every question.
Answer one question, right?
Yeah, I don't have to answer every question. I answer one question. It would be like, if a physicist gave you a theory and it appeals to like causation and time or something like that. It's not, I mean, it's just kind of, it's a little bit, I don't know, illegitimate to ask them for a full-blown theory about what causation is or a full-blown theory about what time is. Yeah, I mean, like epistemologists will do this when they tell you what knowledge is. They'll say like, well, to know something at a time is to, I don't know, have a justified belief at that time. So maybe the theory appeals to time. And it's hardly an objection to say like, well, unless you tell me exactly what time is,
right.
Like your theory is no good. Okay, so it can often happen in philosophy that we give a theory of one thing that appeals to other things, and we don't really have a fully developed theory of those other things.
Yes,
that can happen.
Right.
We gotta like stop somewhere. And as long as we all agree that sperm exists and eggs exist and they're different, then we're all good. Like that's fine. Like to think that there's really nothing that like defines sperm or eggs and there's no difference between them, like that's actually kind of an extreme view. Like that's kind of an insane view to say that there's like nothing.
And that would be a problem, right? So I think like generally, if I give an explanation, I don't always have to have an immediate explanation for that explanation for it to be a legitimate explanation.
Yeah.
However, I definitely don't want to say that explanation is just a brute fact.
Yeah.
Right now, this seems like a very good explanation, right? Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. We'll put a little pin in that.
Yep.
We'll bookmark that. We'll come back to that later. We can say what the sexes are without coming up with a theory of the difference between sperm and eggs. Okay, and motion, and don't ask me what motion is. Don't ask me for like a philosophical analysis.
Aristotle.
So it's gonna get into the weeds real quick. Okay, but anyway, that's one thing you can say. Another thing you can say is, with respect to this species of fruit fly that make the truly enormous sperm, really, most of the size, the reason these sperm are considered so large is they have very long tails. They have very long tails. But if you just consider like the body of the cell body, it's really not actually that truly enormous. It's just really quite large tails. And then also, I mean, here's the most important point. If you compare the mass of these sperm to the mass of eggs made by the females of that species, the eggs are still larger in mass size. Like it's true, if you stretch the sperm out, they're going to be like way longer than the egg is. But if you actually just put both on a scale and measure the mass, that's probably what people meant when they said eggs are larger than sperm. Eggs are the large gamete, sperm are the small gamete. So we don't even really have a problem here. Okay, so those are two responses. And then the third response is, this is a little more speculative, not totally sure about this, but I do mention it in the book. Probably the defining characteristic of sperm and eggs has to do with direction of travel of the nucleus. So the sperm is the thing that like donates its nucleus, and the egg is the thing that like receives a nucleus from the sperm. So it's like direction of genetic transfer. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Because something I discuss in the book is like there's a very, very simple organism that like I think it's a kind of it's not exactly a seaweed, but it's something that grows in water. Like water silk, I think that's what it's called. Water silk. That's like the popular name. Okay, and these little like silky things like will join up and kind of like cells will merge and form like an H, like ladder structure. Okay, and sometimes where the junctions form, when these things are reproducing sexually, like one of the cell on the right and the cell on the left will each donate a nucleus and it meets in the middle. And when that happens, the cells are not described as sperm or eggs or male or female gametes. But sometimes one of the cells will donate its nucleus and it goes across the little bridge into the other cell. And on those occasions, biologists say that's the male gamete. That's the male sex cell. Okay, so if you just want to really respect the way that biologists are talking about male gametes, female gametes, sperm and eggs, then it looks like really what they're picking out is a certain kind of like physiological difference. It doesn't have to be in terms of mass or like the actual motility of the cell itself. It's rather just direction of nuclear transfer of the nucleus. So that probably is the essence of sperm and eggs. So, okay, just gave you 3 possible responses in case somebody hits you with the fruit flies.
You'll be ready.
Now you'll be ready if you get that fruit fly objection. The first response was you don't have to define everything in order to define anything. I liked the way that you put that, Pat. That was nice. The second one was, hey, man, these fruit fly sperm are actually less massive than the fruit fly eggs. So this really isn't even a counterexample to the claim that sperm are smaller than eggs. And then thirdly, probably you didn't. Yeah. So you challenged me to come up with a definition of sperm and a definition of eggs. It's probably something like this. It has to do with direction of genetic transfer. Okay. And in the case of the fruit flies, like the reason those cells are called the sperm is they're the ones that are donating their nucleus to the eggs. Okay, so you asked me for one more objection. That's the one that came to mind.
Yeah,
so
that's a good one. Yeah,
took care of that. Viewers got.
Yeah, took care of that fruit fly problem, except for the ones in my kitchen, I guess. Yeah. So hey, yeah, this has been great stuff. This is an important book. It's an important book because it is a relevant time for that. So I want to make sure people get a copy. Where's the best place to order? Is it on the
It's on Amazon.
On the Amazon, the river.
But I think it's cheaper on the Routledge website. So if you just like search my name and if you just search Bogardus, Nature of the Sexes, I think the first result should be the Routledge website. And at least last time I checked, they had some sort of like discount. So that's nice. So yeah, that's probably the best place to get it.
Awesome. And then for you, what's come up? What are you working on? Anything you want to mention, tease, any of that? Yeah.
Well, I guess I'll probably keep like mining this vein for a while because I think it is important that, especially with regard to like the law and the practice of medicine and medical education, like there's a whole lot of misinformation out there that I think needs to be corrected. That's part of the reason I wrote this book is like you might think this is some weird like esoteric conversation about what the sexes are, but it has super practical implications with regard to like who can access which spaces. Like we've segregated a big part of we've segregated much of our society on the basis of sex. Like, yeah, these bathrooms are for females, these are for males, these sports teams are for females, these are for males. These colleges are for females. These are for males. Okay, so we've segregated a lot of our society on the basis of sex. So it turns out that it's extremely important that we understand what the sexes are. There's been a movement recently to allow that a person's gender identity is like determinative of their sex. So if you have a so-called female gender identity, then that's just another way of being female. And so you are female. And so you should be able to access female spaces if you just have a female gender identity. So if you have a certain kind of like psychological state. So that's something I do in the book is try to think about what gender identity is, what the sexes really are, so we can help see why having a gender identity does not actually make you female. Having a female gender identity, insofar as that makes sense, doesn't actually make you female.
Right.
So yeah, that's the sort of thing I'm thinking about these days in the early stages of a paper about like what the implications would be for medicine and medical education if we really abandoned talk of the sexes and how that would be actually sort of regressive and harmful if we did that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's like what's on the horizon. That's the sort of thing I'm working on these days.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're doing it. I think you're the right guy for the job, and I want to encourage people to support you at the very least by grabbing a copy of your book. You're on Twitter, so X. Sorry, I'm still behind the times. So they can link up with you there. Check out your Phil papers and all that stuff. You got lots of good work out there. So Dr. Bogardus, thank you again for taking time. This has been a joy as always.
All right, thanks again for having me on.